In honor of Lady Gaga coming to Singapore for Mayhem Tour in May, I'm going to be doing this makeup series where I recreate some of her iconic makeup looks across the different eras. So here's how we're going to structure the videos. In this first part, I'll be covering looks that require a little bit of advanced makeup skills. I'll be going through the different methods of blocking your brows depending on the type of base you need for the makeup looks. And I'm going to be posting this part of the series first because I'm sure you need a bit of time to practice these techniques. But as a heads up, the second part of this series will feature looks that require you to do some sort of bleach brow business. Whether you bleach your brows or not, it's up to you. The third in this series will feature a lot of graphic liner looks. The last video will feature looks that are slightly simpler and are perfect for people who don't really have the time to practice more advanced makeup skills that are needed for the more complicated looks. So hopefully this makeup series will be helpful for those of you who are attending the concerts. Am I being too ambitious? Maybe. But I'm just super excited after watching both of her Coachella performances. So sit back, relax, and I hope that one of my videos will help you out. So welcome to the first part of this video series. I'll be going through how to block your brows, and using the same skills, I'll be doing these 3 different looks. So if you just want to know how exactly to do the color portion of the makeup look, feel free to skip to the respective timestamps of the different looks. But if not, let's just start with how to block your brows. And the first step of brow blocking is to actually glue down your eyebrows. So before I start gluing them down, I like to take some rubbing alcohol on a tissue, or you can use like an alcohol wipe. And I'm using the rubbing alcohol to just clean off any moisturizer that's on my brow area. So to glue down my eyebrows, I actually like to use lash glue, and I'm so grateful to whoever suggested using lash glue to glue down your brow hairs because my brow hairs are super stubborn. So if I just use a glue stick, it will take multiple layers and a lot of time to actually glue my eyebrows down. And that is why lash glue works really great for me because the tackiness allows even the smallest hairs to stick down flat on my skin. And second of all, it's waterproof, so even if you go in with multiple layers of product on top of it, the brow hairs won't stick up. So the lash glue that I'm using is from DUP and I think it's latex free. And I love using it to stick down my false lashes when I use them. So when you're using lash glue to stick down your brows, it's important to work in small sections because the glue dries down really quickly. So I'm starting off with the front of my brows. I'm applying the glue onto my skin itself and on my brow hairs. And I'm using a spoolie to just brush the hairs up. And I'm just repeating along my brow. And the tail for me is always a little bit difficult because my brow hairs are so stubborn that they just stick straight down. So I'm really doing my best to get them to stay up. If you look at how fast my brow hair is glued down, so I'll wait for this side to dry. I'm gonna move on to my other brow. And again, making sure to coat all of my brow hairs, including the really teeny tiny ones. And you can always apply a little bit more glue at the start because it gives you more time to move the hairs around before the glue dries down. And when the glue is dry, just give it a rough press through to make sure that there aren't any little brow hairs sticking up. You can sort of run your finger lightly back and forth to check. But yeah, this is so much faster than using a glue stick. And moving on, I'm still going to be using my glue stick, but I'm using it more to smooth out the surface of the brow. And I know people always use the purple color Elmer's glue stick. I find that the normal one works just as well, just that the purple one shows you when exactly the glue is dry. And yes, I do not lick my glue sticks. I find it unhygienic, but do that if you want to. I will just go in with a wet wipe, lightly moisten the surface of the glue stick. And this is really important because if your glue stick is dry, it will just keep dragging along your brow and cause a lot of peeling to occur, which will be a big pain in the ass. So first, I'll just go in upward motions, so base layer. And I'll just wait for this layer to dry. I just use my hand mirror to stand it dry, or you can use a hair dryer or an electric fan. I'm just using my handheld mirror that I use because I can't see that well, which is why you always end up seeing a little bit of a mirror when I film my tutorials. And it's really important to make sure that the layer of glue is dry before you go into the next one because if it's wet, it will just stick onto the glue stick and it will just peel off. Now it's dry, I'm going in my second layer. When instead of going up, I'm going back and forth. So this helps to fill in the grooves of the brow hairs. And make sure to get the glue only on the brow area. If it goes up above the brow, just use a wet wipe again to just slightly smooth out the edges. So you see there's a little bit of extra glue. I'm just using my wet wipe to smooth it down. Now that my glue is like 90% dry, I'll be going in with a layer of powder just to set everything down. So I'll be going in with a translucent powder. I'm using the RCMA. So I just packed on an even layer of powder on my puff, and I'll be pressing the powder onto my brow. So this not only helps to set the glue, it also helps to fill the gaps of the brow hairs just a little bit more. And I'm using the clean side just to wipe off any excess, especially on the skin that's surrounding the brows. So now that your brows are glued down, you can just go on to conceal your brows. So let me pin up my hair first. So instead of using a really orange color corrector, I'm using a peach corrector instead that's slightly closer to my skin tone. I'm using a flat shader brush and brushing it or patting it onto my brow hairs, wherever there's a little bit of darkness showing through. And I'm patting the product on instead of brushing it back and forth, just so that I don't disturb the glue that's underneath. I'm taking the clean side of the powder puff and lightly pressing the concealer into my brow area. And I'm trying to blend out the edges of the concealer as well. And then taking a thin layer of powder again, I'm setting the color corrector in place and lightly patting away the excess with the clean part of the puff. I'm going to go in with another layer just on the areas that are a little bit dark. I'm also applying a thicker layer of powder on top of it and allowing it to bake for a little bit, brushing the excess off. So now we're going to move into concealing your brows, and this step will really depend on what kind of base that you'll be using next. So skip to these timestamps for each of the different base and I'll see you there. Welcome to the Bond This Way part of the video. So now I'll be showing you how to conceal your brows using your concealer and your foundation. The easiest way to do your base is to use a super high coverage foundation like the Kryolan TV Paint Stick or the Danessa Myricks Vision Cream Cover, but I only have the one in white, so I'll just be using my everyday products for this part of the look. Starting off with my Kosas concealer in the shade 030, which is the olive shade. I'm taking it on another flat shader brush. I just cleaned this one out from the color corrector, and I'm patting it on top of the powdered areas. I don't want to be retouching this area much because if you keep moving the product around, it will sort of mess up whatever's underneath. And I bring the concealer up towards the rest of my skin and using pressing motions to blend the concealer outwards. And of course, go in with thin layers in the start so that you don't have a big glob of concealer on your brow that you have to blend out. And again, let the concealer sit for a little bit before going in with my powder and setting the concealer in place. I just went in with another layer of concealer and powder until my brows look like this. So now that my brows look like this, I'll be going in with my foundation. So I'll be going in with the MAC Studio Fix Fluid Foundation. But of course, use whatever foundations that you have on hand. I'm just pumping some out on my hand. And I'm using my finger to spread everything out. And I do want something that's a little bit more fuller coverage all around my face, so that everything looks more seamless, because I don't think you can do like natural coverage with your brows looking like this. And this time I'm using the cleaner side of my puff to blend my foundation in. Because this foundation is a little bit more on the liquid side, I just want to blend out the rest of my foundation first before I go in with the foundation on my brows, just so that I can minimize the amount of time that a thick layer of liquid is sitting on top of them. Then now I'm going in with the foundation on my brow. And also carry it down to my eyelid. Of course, you can set everything in translucent powder again, but if you want extra coverage, you can go in with a powder foundation. I'm going in with the MAC Studio Fix Powder Foundation on the powder side of the puff, and I'm using it to set around my brow area. So now that I'm looking like an egg, let's move on to the rest of the makeup. I'll be recreating this makeup look that Lady Gaga wore for a music video as well as her album cover. And you can tell that prosthetics were used in this look because of the three-dimensional look of her cheekbones as well as the horns on her forehead. But for this look, I won't be doing any prosthetic work. I'll be replicating that 3D look using contouring instead. So I'll be using a lot of my trusty Judydoll contour palette as well as some grey and white eyeshadows just to amp up the 3Dness of everything. I've already blocked my brow, so let's move on to the contouring. I'll be using this fluffy sort of flat brush to mainly carve out the shape of the cheekbones as well as the horns first. And I'll be moving on to slightly smaller, flatter brushes when I go in to do any detail work, mostly when we're adding more intense shadows and highlights. So I'm using the Judydoll palette and I'm going in with the lighter shade first. And I'm packing the contour powder on my brush. And I'll be stamping on the contour on the areas where you want the highest points of the look to be. The highest point of the horns would be around the middle of your forehead, and the cheekbones would be the highest point of your own cheekbone. So I'm simply stamping on the contour to mark out where I want them to be. So I want the horn to be around here. So I'm stamping two curved points on my forehead, and I'm doing it with the mirror in front of my face because I wanted the horns to look the most 3D at the front of my face. And then on my cheekbone, I'm going to be stamping out another curve here and here just to make my cheekbones look extra pointy. And then from this side, I'll just be filling in these areas to connect them. And then I'm looking from this side and I'm just connecting the points to my hairline. And then I'm also connecting these two points together on my temple. And then from the front, because my eyebrow is slightly curved like this, I'll be adding more powder on my actual brow bone just to shrink that curve inwards. And from the front, I want a smooth point from the tip of the horn down to the tip of the cheekbone. So I'm just patting the powder on to the area. And from the front, I'm bringing the contour down to the corner of my eye just so that there's some cheekbone action happening here. And I'm using a fluffy brush to blend out the edges, moving it downwards on my face just so that there isn't a super stark line. And I'm repeating on the other side of my face, again facing forward and stamping the points down. And this is where you want, again, to look forward in the mirror so that you're able to replicate the placement on the other side of your face. And then I'm blending it into my hairline and filling in the gaps. And I'm blending the contour downwards just to blend the edges out, before taking my fluffy brush again and blending everything out even more. Now I'm blending everything downwards and not towards the points that we have not contoured because I want to keep those high points lighter and more highlighted. And again, patting more shadow on the brow bone to bring the point in. I'm also using my same brush and the contour powder to contour my nose and my nose bridge as well as the tip of my nose. I'm also bringing the shadow onto my eyelid, slightly on my actual brow, so that I can imitate the look of a deep set eye, which I don't naturally have. I can see the difference between both of my eyes right now, and repeating on the other eye. Now I'm using the same brush and the darker color, and I'm packing the color in again. I'm applying it just on the edge of the contour that we did between the contour and the highlighted part. So I'm further adding more shadow just to make everything look a lot more sunken in, as well as on my forehead, just to emphasize the point on the horn. And I'm blending everything upwards. And whatever's left on my brush, I'm blending the contour towards the original color that we've put down already. And this side already looks more three-dimensional compared to this. And this is why I love using brushes like this, because the shape allows me to really pack on the color, but because it's also slightly fluffy, it lets me blend out the color as well. And then just blending within the area. Needed, I will just take the previous color and I'll go in between them and go back and forth just to blend out the darker color into the lighter one. You still want to create a gradient effect to the contour itself. Then using whatever's left to further define the contour that I did already on my nose and my nose bridge, as well as on my eye itself. And I really like to emphasize this area of my nose bridge and my nose, so as the tip of my nose, just to make everything look a lot more dimensional instead of using one single color to contour everything out. And then whatever's left, I'm using to also contour my jaw. Now I'm taking a flat shader brush that's even smaller than the one that I first used, and I'll be using this to do a lot more pinpointed contouring. And this time I'll be using a cool toned matte palette, and this one is from Makeup by Mario, and it's the neutrals version of their Master Matte palette. And compared to my contour powder, there are more cool tones in this palette that I'll be using to further define the shadows. So I'll be taking this grey and mixing it with this brown. Now I'm really tracing the contour that we did again, and this time I want to make sure that the lines are actually smooth, especially on the pointiest parts of the horns and the cheekbones. For this part, I'm doing the carving out instead of the shading part of the contouring process. So I'm carving out the horns on my forehead, and I only put eyeshadow on one side of the brush. So I'm using the cleaner side to bring the colour down into my contour. Just to lightly blend everything in. And I can also go in with my previous brush and blend the colours together. And I'm using less product on the brush on the other parts of my face because I want the most definition to be on the pointiest parts, and on the curved parts I'm just doing again the carving out, but in a less intense way such that the pointiest parts stand out a lot more. And this is what things are looking like now with the extra contour put in and without. And now that I'm happy with my contour, let's go in and do the highlighting part. For the highlighting part, I am going in again with a clean flat shader brush. And I'm using this highlighting shade in the Judydoll palette to do the main highlighting first, before I go in with an even smaller flat shader brush to do more pinpoint highlighting. So I'm taking the product that's on the brush, and I'm using this quite broadly on my cheekbone. And I'm bringing the shadow up into the corner of my eye. So for this part, you do want to use a brightening shade that's your undertone as well as slightly lighter than your skin, so that you're able to blend the shade into the foundation that you've used. And I'm really using this to just add that 3D pop to the cheekbone. So compared to this side of my face, this side does look a lot more 3-dimensional to me at least. And I'm doing the same on the horn part. So using flat shader brushes like this really allows you to go into the corner to place the highlight, and then as it's slightly fluffy as well, I'm able to blend out the edges of the powder into my skin. And I'm also bringing this shade on my eyelid itself as well as to highlight the inner corner of my eye. And I'm also using the matte highlight to highlight my nose and a little bit on my forehead. Again, just to make everything look 3-dimensional even though my face is really matte at this point. And I'm also highlighting this part of my face. And I'm repeating the highlighting on the other side of my face. So I'm bringing the brush close to the boundary that we created using the contour. So I'm really carving out the shape of the cheekbone as well as the horns on my forehead. And then blending the powder to the rest of my face. And then after you put in the highlight, you can go ahead and add more shadow again to redefine the edges, especially if you are blending the brightening powder into the contour part. And now for the final part of my highlighting, I'm going in with a white eyeshadow. With my teeny tiny flat shader brush, I'm packing the shadow mostly on the tip of the brush. And then I'm adding the shadow to the pointiest parts of the highlight. So this will be the tip of the horn. And this time, I'm not really blending everything out. I'm mainly drawing 2 lines. I'm doing the same on my cheekbone. So 2 lines of white. And this time, I'm slowly blending it down on the length of my cheekbone. I want the white to be brightest at the front of my cheekbone, as well as on the tip itself. Bring it slightly outwards. I'm doing the same on the other side. So blending out the white on the entirety of the long part of the cheekbone, and then packing on the white at the front and emphasizing the tip of the cheekbone. I'm using the same flat shader brush that we used for the brightening powder part, and then I'm using it to again further highlight my face, also in the inner corners of my eyes, the tip of my nose bridge, my cupid's bow, and also bringing the white into the inner corner of my eye just to carve out the shape here. And then I'm blending it towards my eyelid. I'm taking the slightest bit of the white and I'm adding it onto my cheekbone itself. So there's a little bit of a natural highlight on the cheekbone. If you do have a white liquid liner, you can also use that to add more highlight. I'm using the white liner mainly to make the points super sharp. Then taking the shadow and patting it over the area. So this is the main contouring and highlighting part done. The next part that really stands out from this look is the graphic eyeliner that she did. And for this part, I'll be mainly using the House Select's High Power Pigment in the black shade, or you can just use any gel liner or even liquid liner if you have that. I just prefer using something from a squeezy tube so that I can use my own brush to broadly paint on the black, especially when there's such a thick line on the upper lid. So first I'll be using a thin flat brush like this, or like an angled brush, basically anything that's thin and sharp. And I'll be using this together with my contour powder to map out the shape of the eyeliner first before going in with the black. So for this, you want to have your eyes opened. So I'm drawing in a line and then opening my eyes to see whether the shadow is showing up. And I'm mainly drawing a line just underneath the contour that I created, because I do want a little bit of a gap between the contour as well as the eyeliner that we will be drawing in later. And from following the angle of my lower lash line, I'm drawing a line to meet the point. And for the front of the eye, there's a little bit of an inner corner liner thing happening, so I'm extending the line outwards, following the angle of my inner tear duct. I'm repeating the steps on this eye, but because both of my eyes are not the same shape, I'll be trying to match the liner on both of my eyes. So you'll see my eyes flickering around a lot because I'm trying to compare where I'm placing my shadow down to make sure that both my eyes look symmetrical when they're open. So now that I'm happy with the shape, let's go in with the eyeliner. Again, you can use your gel liner with a brush or your liquid liner pens. Just whatever you have on hand. For this, I'm squeezing out the pigment on the back of my hand and I'm loading up the brush, making sure that the product is really packed into the brush and that everything looks smooth and compact on it without any lumps. So I'm tracing out the shape that we put in before filling in the rest of my lid. And because we really packed the product into the brush, we're getting an even layer of product applied thinly all over. And I'm using pressing motions to apply the pigment onto my eyelids. Because my eyes aren't the smoothest, I'm just raising my eyebrows and looking down to stretch out the skin on my eyes so that I can go in again and touch up the edges. And then for the inner corner, I'm using the tip of my brush and bringing the line into my inner tear duct area. And because I have this extra fold in my inner tear duct area, I like to look away and really use the tip of my brush to pack the eyeliner into the area so that when I look forward, there's a smooth line from the inner corner of my eye to my bottom lash line. And now it's time to repeat this on the other eye. And now I'm opening my eyes and comparing between both of my eyes. And then I'm fixing the shape of the liner first before filling everything in. And again, pressing motions to get the pigment on in a thin, even layer. Loading up more product and using the tip of the brush to sharpen up the edges and to sharpen up the wing. And now defining the inner corner and then looking the other way and drawing the line in. Now moving on to the lower lash line, I am going in with a liquid liner pen this time, just because the line is a little bit thinner on my bottom lid than it is on the top, and using a eyeliner brush gives me a little bit more control than using my gel liner would. So for this, you want to use the inner corner eyeliner that we did as a guide, and we're drawing a line parallel to it, following the angle of your eye, and then extending it out and joining it to the end of the wing. And then using the pen and connecting the line. And then for the tip of the line, you want to slightly round it and matching the thickness across the entire lower lash line. And then lastly, on top, there's also a small little line right here. So I'm just drawing a line mostly in the middle of my eyelid. And this is the eyeliner done. Next, I'm just going in with a coating of mascara on my lashes, just to make them look a little bit darker against the black background that we have. I'm also just using the mascara as a tint for my lashes and a little bit on my lower lashes as well. Just want them to look like they're there. Now that the eyes are done, let's move on to the rest of my face. Primarily, where should we put the mole? So I've seen different versions of this look where she doesn't have a mole anywhere in her face. There's one where there's a mole on the corner of her eye, and in the album cover, there is one on her cheek. So I'll be replicating the one that's on the cover and I'll be drawing in a mole on my cheek. And I'm taking my same liquid liner, and I want to draw a mole at the bottom of my nose, right in the middle of the open cheek that we created using the highlighting and contouring. So placing a mole. And the last part is the lips. And again, there are different versions of this look floating around. I've seen one where there's like a purple lip, but I'll be again following the album cover, so I'm going in with a bright red. And I'm choosing a red that is slightly on the glossier side, so I'm using a really creamy lipstick, and this is quite busted up, but I really love this formula for me makeup. So I'll be lining my lips with a red lip liner first, just to increase the longevity of my creamy lipstick. And I'll be following my natural lip shape, maybe just slightly overlining on my top and bottom lip. And then I'm filling my lips in with my lipstick. And I am using a lip brush to sharpen up the edges. And this is the finished Born This Way look. So I know it's super natural, very everyday friendly, but not really. It's pretty involved because of the brow blocking, followed by the precision, contouring and highlighting, followed by the graphic liner. So there's a lot of slightly more difficult elements to this look that require a lot of patience and precision. But if you do have the time and patience, this look is definitely really worth doing because it's really iconic and you get to experiment and play around with different makeup techniques. Welcome to the Disease part of the video. I'll be recreating this particular look in Lady Gaga's Disease music video. And I chose this look because I really love the asymmetry of it, especially with the different eye looks and that amazing graphic lip that's honestly not that difficult to do. So I think that this makeup look sort of falls in the middle of difficulty in the variety of looks that Lady Gaga has done over the years. As you can see in this picture, Lady Gaga actually has bleached brows in this look, but because I have dark hair, I'm opting to do a blocked brow look instead, especially because of that line that's being drawn as the eyebrow for one of the eyes. For this look, I'm going in with a lighter foundation base that's not my skin tone. So to color correct my brows, I'll be using these two color correctors from Kosas, one that's lighter and one that's a darker peach. And I'm using that to color correct my brows. And I'm dabbing on the concealer with my flat brush. I'm just making sure that the color corrector is around the same shade or even lighter than my actual skin tone because it makes it a lot easier to blend my base products on top of it. And I'm just blending out the edges with small sponge. And I'm generously setting everything down with more powder. For foundation, I'm going in with a lighter shade, but since I don't have a foundation that is of a medium to full coverage that's lighter than my skin tone, I'm mixing some white foundation. This is the Vision Cream cover from Dennis Americ's in the white shade with my MAC Studio Fix Fluid Foundation in NC15. And I'll be mixing them on the back of my hand to get the right shade that I want. And I'm going to start applying my foundation like normal. And I'm using the same powder puff that I applied my powder with, just on the side that's cleaner. Then I'm using the foundation to also cover up my brows. Now just on my brow area, I'll be taking more powder and setting everything. So basically, I just added a couple more layers of powder and concealer on top of my brows until I'm pretty happy with the coverage. And now let's move on to the face and the eye. I'm going to contour my face in the Judydoll palette. And I'm using the lighter shade here to just carve out some cheekbones. Contour my forehead. I'm also using a smaller brush to carve out my nose. And I want to make my brow bone a little bit higher than it normally is. So I'm putting my contour powder on the front of my brow instead. And I'm blending the shadow down onto my actual brow bone. Clearing my filtrum just because I found when I put lighter foundations over it, and also the bottom of my lip. Now I'm using the same RCMA powder and adding highlights onto the high points of my face. I'm using a brush to sweep off the excess. Moving on to the eyes, I'll be using this Vise quad that has this red colour as well as this warm brown, and I'll mostly be using these two shades in the palette. For my eyes, I'll be using a small fluffy brush, and I'm mixing these two shades in the palette, getting the excess off of my hand, and I'm using this shade pretty close to my lash line, just to get a shadow around my eye. And I'm doing this for both of my eyes. And I'll be taking more of the red shade on my brush and using it in the center of my eyelids. For my right eye, I'll be taking more of this brown shade with a little bit of this darker brown. And I'm gonna go in from that new brow line and doing a C shape in the inner corner. And then I'm blending the shadow towards my lids. And while remaining my brush, I'm brushing it along my lash line just to blend everything together. I'll also be running the same dark brown shadows on my lash line on the other eye. And topping up the red if needed. Next, I'm taking a burgundy red gel pencil and I'm going to tightline my waterline for both of my eyes. I'm also bringing the liner down a little bit on my actual lash line. I'm also applying it on my upper lash line as well. Next, I'll be going in with a red blue eyeshadow, which looks something like this. So something dark with a red base and a blue-green shift to work. I'm taking it on a flat shader brush and applying it on the inside of my eye. And blending out the edges as well. Then I'll be going in with a glittery yellow-green eyeshadow. And then I'm pressing it in the inner corner like that. And I'm using my brush with the blue-green eyeshadow to really press that shadow into my eye. And this is the effect that it gives together. Now I'm just going in with the red and packing it to the front of the new brow. And I'm using a black liquid liner to basically draw a new brow upwards, almost like in a 45-degree angle to your brow. And then I'm using the liner to thicken up the front of the brow. For my other eye, I'll be going in with peachy highlighter on my finger and then using it in the inner corner as well as on the entire lid. Then I'm going to deepen up the contour of my outer corner of my eye here, connecting it to the temple part, just to give an illusion of a deeper set eye. And same for my other eye as well. Next, you just want to curl your lashes and put on mascara. For lips, I'm going in with my lips a better kind of shade. And then lightly patting it across my lips just to give it a little bit more colour because I covered them up with my concealer just now. And then taking the same liquid liner, you want to draw 2 points from your cupid's bow and connect it to, I guess, 1/3 of your upper lip in the middle. And you want to do the same for the bottom lip. So 2 dots again. Connecting down to the middle third. And then 2 lines. For the top lip, you do want to draw a line down that's straighter than the bottom lip. So for the bottom lip, you want to follow the curve of your lip to connect it to the outer edges of your lip. But for the top, you want to draw a line straight down. And to finish up the lip, you want to add a little bit of concealer to the middle parts. This is the finishing touch. I am adding a little bit more red to this part of the inner corner of my eye, just so there isn't too big of a gap in between both my eyes. And this is the disease look done. If you want to simplify this look, of course you can have your bleached brow ready. The blocking of the brows take up like half the time. And of course you can just do the eye look without like the lighter base. You can do it without the bleached brow, you can do it without this brow on top. I think the main points of the look is definitely this asymmetrical eyes as well as the liquid liner lips. But I think together it gives a really nice dramatic look that's definitely really iconic and identifiable. Welcome to this part of the video where I'll show you how to recreate this look by Lady Gaga for Applause. This is one of the looks that really stood out to me back in the day when Applause came out and the Applause music video first came out. So let's recreate it today. Starting off with my brows already glued down, I'm taking some of my loose powder from RCMA and setting the glue in place before going in with my peach color corrector and color correcting my brows using patting motions and lightly blending out the edges to the rest of my skin. And I let the color corrector dry down a little bit on my brows before I go in with another layer of powder to set everything down. While my eyebrows bake a little, let's talk about white foundations. So I used to really dread doing a full white base because back in the day when I first started doing it, I couldn't afford really nice white foundation, so I opted for the more affordable ones like LA Girl white foundation or the color mixer. And I also have this one from a random Chinese brand from Shopee, and I found that the more affordable options for these foundations had to be not very pigmented, so whenever I was using them, I wasn't able to get a full white base on the first layer and I had to keep layering and layering till I was happy with the result. Sometimes when I was blending in the foundation, some of the patches were lifting up and I found that super annoying and I just didn't want to do much white base makeup looks. But everything changed after I noticed that the Merix had a white foundation and I was sitting on it and eventually ended up buying it because Sterling Tao, who is a makeup artist who I follow on Instagram, whom I deeply admire, was recommending this particular foundation in her white base foundation tutorial. So I just bit the bullet and decided to buy a tube of it. And this is the Merix Vision Cream cover in the white shade, and it's super pigmented because it's meant to be used both as a foundation and a concealer. So I'm able to cover up both my brows and my skin with around one pump of this foundation. But as you can see, it's not a really big bottle, and currently the place where I bought it from, Judydoll, is sold out of this particular product. So if you do have this, you're super lucky and you can go ahead and use this for the rest of this look. But if you have other white foundation options like the LA Girl white foundation, or even the Ben 9 Super White or the Kryolan TV paint sticks, just go ahead and use whatever you have. But just be prepared that you might have to do some layering in order to get a more opaque base. And now I'm placing about one pump on the back of my hand, and I'll be using this all over my face. And because this foundation is on the thicker side, when I watched the tutorial on how to do a seamless white base, she recommended using a powder puff like this to blend the foundation out so that you don't get as much streaking as you would when you use your brush to blend it out. And now that I'm happy with the coverage that I have on my skin, I'm going to go in with more product on the puff, and I'm using it to conceal and blend out my brows. I'm taking a fluffy brush with a lot of powder and I'm tapping the powder all over my face. Sprinkle an initial layer of powder all over, dabbing the powder into place and taking more powder on the puff and pressing it into my skin. And for my last step, I'm taking some white eyeshadow on the same powder puff and I'm pressing this all over my face to get an even layer of white. And I find that this step is one of the most important parts of having an even light base because sometimes the foundation might still end up looking a little bit patchy at some areas after powdering, and this step really helps to even everything out. And this is the finished white base. It can be a little bit of a process, especially if you're using more liquid-based product instead of creams. And to be honest, for this look, you don't actually have to really conceal your brows that well. But mostly because you'll be going in with a lot of really bright paints, you should cover up any sort of darkness showing through from the white. But I just wanted to show you how to get this even base in case you want to use it for any other kinds of white base makeup looks in the future. If you do have these kinds of colourful wax or cream based palettes like the Makeup Forever Flash palette or any of its knockoffs or inspired products, this step would be slightly easier for you because you can just simply take the product and then smear it over your face. But because I don't have those, I'm using water activated paints instead, and I'm using my split liners from Glisten Cosmetics. So I mixed up one of the blue shades and I'm using my finger to apply this colour on my lid. So with my eyes looking down, using my fingers to spread the paint in a downwards motion. Next I mix the teal green colour and then using it on my brow bone. The beauty of this look is that you don't actually have to be super duper precise about it. You just want to get the general placements of the colours where they're supposed to be. I mixed another blue colour that's a bit darker than the original one I put on. And I'm going over that again, just roughly, and working on blending the different colours that we put on top already. So I'm basically working on layering the different colours until I'm happy with the outcome. For this part, I am using a little brush just to get a little bit more precision, but also using my fingers to drag the paint down. Now I'm going to go into the yellows. So I'm mixing some of the yellow paint with some water. And this yellow is a little bit of warmth to it, so I'm adding a bit of orange as well. And I'll be applying the yellow on the outer corner of my left side of my face and dabbing a little bit of orange into it. And there's small little spits. There's small little dots of yellow on. I'm gonna put a bit more white on my lips. And now I'm going in with the red. And it's like a blend between an orange and a red. So I'll be adding a little bit of orange and red together. And I'm focusing the red on the left corners of my mouth. And I'm bringing it into the inner part of my bottom lip. And basically whatever's left on my hand, I'm just rubbing my hand together. I want it to be a little like mixed up. And I'm using this mixture to add some streaks right at the sides of my face, close to my cheekbones and my jawline. And this really adds to the lived-inness of this look. And lastly, I'm adding a bit of dark blue. And I'm adding it to my lash line just to add a little bit more definition to my eyes. And this is the applause look done. Again, it'd be a lot easier if you do have like a cream pigment palette. As you can see, it's also doable if you have water-activated liners. You just have to mix up a lot more of it and mix it in a slightly thicker consistency so that you're able to spread the colour out onto your face. Again, you don't actually have to do a really precise job with this look because the whole point of it is to be abstract and random. Just that because Lady Gaga has done it already, we do want to follow that placement a little bit, as well as the colours that we used. So in this video, I covered the way that I glued on my brows, as well as 3 different bases that I did with 3 different looks. Hopefully you'll be able to apply this into other looks. If not, feel free to ignore this video, just look at the different colour placements that I did for the different looks instead. But I think it's just really fun to just experiment different techniques and try to brush up on your makeup skills when you have a reason to do so. So keep an eye out for the next 3 parts of this makeup series, and I hope that this video helped you out. So if you like this video, feel free to subscribe, share this video with your friends if you want to all dress up for the concert, and I hope that you'll stay around for my next video.